everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything, from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal. Today, we're going to discuss topics that are in the news this week. This is the week of November 10th, 2021. Demetrius and I picked a couple of topics each, and we're going to explore them. Good morning, D. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I think we've got a few interesting stories here that might have flown under the radar for some people.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a lighter week, actually, for tech news. It's more like interesting topics rather than like huge, like, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean the big like Facebook renaming themselves as Meta. Those stories don't come along all the time. So by contrast, it definitely feels like it's lighter.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, so let's just jump right in. I'm kind of excited about this. So, a few articles had come out about U.com search engine. So, basically, this company is launching its beta this week. They took a $20 million seed round from Marc Benioff's Time Ventures, Sound Ventures, Day One Ventures, a long list of angels. And for those of you who don't know, Marc Benioff is the CEO of Salesforce, well, founder and CEO of Salesforce. This company is launched by the former chief scientist of Salesforce with the goal of completely rethinking search from a design and content absorption point of view. So, the way in which we absorb information from a search, they want to change that. They want to look at it from a different angle. So, basically, the search results appear in categories by app, such as Yelp or Reddit, and you scroll left to right to see the results in the category rather than this continuous up and down scroll that we're used to with Google. They want to keep it super simple. They want you to have the ability to customize it yourself and just kind of relook at things differently. And there's also some privacy stuff in that in there, and Demetrius will talk about that. But the idea here is let's provide some competition to Google. And I'm totally not against this at all. I feel like there's room in the market for a lot of different search engines and a lot of different approaches to search. And so this is interesting. I want to talk about. So D, what do you think about this?
Oh, I think it's interesting. I think it's really interesting that we have two high level people from Salesforce involved with this. Salesforce, I know their search is pretty sophisticated. It's quite capable. I mean, it tends to be working in a smaller field of results than Google is, but just because the web is so vast. But they have some very interesting things within Salesforce's search, such as AI backing it, their Einstein product, and a lot of different ways to customize your search in order to help you get to the data that you want.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from that, kind of the data presentation, kind of the UX of the search results, they have some screens up. I expect those to kind of change because they're telling us they're still kind of in a design phase.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because YouTube or Google hasn't really faced any serious competition for quite some time, and it does feel like their UX has somewhat stagnated when it comes to search. So this should give it a good goosing and like maybe make them stand up and take notice and introduce some new features.
You know, the hard part about this is that I am so stuck on the way search has been happening since the early 90s when we all started using it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so anytime like a new design comes out, the first thought, being completely honest, first thought that comes to my mind is like, ooh, is this going to be like a relearning of information absorption? Like I have to rethink how I look for information. And then the second thought is, if I have to rethink how I look for it, am I going to miss stuff? That's just my initial thought. You know what I mean? Whenever something new comes up when it comes to search,
Yeah.
do you have any thoughts like that when you see these completely new redesigns?
Well, when somebody steps in and starts doing anything within search, the number one question is how good is the search going to be? Like
Mm-hmm.
the backbone of the product for search in particular is just fundamental. And you can have the best interface in the world, but if you're not doing a very good job of getting people the results that they're looking for, then you don't really have anything. You don't really have a true competitor. What you're going to end up doing is just inspiring Google or whoever else in that instance it might be to kind of make improvements to their own system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, the other thing I thought, I was like, wow, U.com. I was like, how'd they get that?
Yeah, it's also like doesn't sound very intuitive. Like it's like I hear you.com and I think, okay, this is about like managing something about my personal life. It sounds
Yeah.
personal, right? It's about me.
Mm.
But search isn't about me. Search is about like let's find out what's out there in the world.
Yeah.
The other question I have when speaking to kind of search result quality and things like that is if I'm customizing it so it's only coming or it's emphasizing certain sources like Reddit
Hmm.
or Twitter or whatever it is, am I going to miss out on some good stuff because of how my filters are arranged?
Yeah, a lot of good questions. I mean, I haven't
Mhm.
seen any interviews yet with the CEO of the company or at least the chief scientist or technologist. I'd love to hear more about their approach to this. I mean, to go back to the naming part when you talked about u.com from like UX perspective, I think their description of why u.com was because it's about you. Because search is about you. It's about customizing it for you. It's about giving you the results you
Sure.
need. So I think that's the kind of the play they have
Well,
on
I think
that.
from a designer perspective, it is about the user. But for me, going to Google, I mean, I'm not googling myself. I'm not managing my personal data on it. It's I am if I'm searching for something. I mean, it could even be something that I don't really care for that much. I just want to know more about it. I'm not. I don't necessarily want it associated with me.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think the idea of like rethinking search, I would imagine that this is something that Google does as well, right? You know what I mean? Like every once in a while, a team gets together, does a bunch of research, and says, "Hey, maybe there's a way to rethink how we approach search."
Hmm.
So the fact that this company is kind of launching, they're giving it a shot. Um, Kudos to them. Like I'm all for it, but it'll be interesting to see if you can change behavior, right? People are very used to like you said, they do a search and then there's a whole ton of topics that come, I mean, a
Hmm.
whole ton sources that come up, and they just kind of like scroll through them. And I think one of the other things too is that they offer true incognito mode where everything about you, including your IP address, is hidden.
So that's interesting because that heavily implies that there's a VPN involved. And usually VPNs are expensive, right? Like
Yeah.
they have a cost involved and you have to pay for it. And the company is saying, U.com is saying that they're basically not doing any monetization. There's no ads. There's no subscription fees or anything. So there could potentially, like, I know, would like to know more about how this incognito mode works, where they're
Hmm.
hiding the IP from the ISPs and stuff.
Yeah.
But if they are basically providing VPN services in order to hide your your search activity, then that could be putting themselves in kind of a revenue challenging situation.
Well, they're not going to not have ads, though. I mean, they'll still have ads on the platform. What it said is that they vow to never sell your data to a third party, even when an ad is served. The owner of the ad gets no data about you, something Google does not do. And this is all from the article. I forgot to mention that we were reading about it in TechCrunch. So they did a nice job of kind of like outlining the basics of what they're trying to do. Um, it's interesting because doesn't that mean if they're vowing to never give that data to the third party, that means that they actually have it themselves. It means they become like an amazing marketing company.
Yeah, and to the point, because you're doing your own customization on this, and that's one of the differences is that Google does a ton of personalization. Like it starts to learn what you tend to search for and what you tend to look for, and it personalizes your experience. So that's being done passively on their side.
Uh-huh.
You allows you to customize it. So that's you taking action in order to modify your experience. So what that means is that you.com will ultimately have more data about you potentially than Google does because it has more activity going on. So one thing to keep in mind is that they're promising not to sell the third party data, but they're your data to the third party, but they're not promising not to use your third party data in order to serve you ads. At least not
Hmm.
at this point. So, and one of the things they said is to expand on what you said about monetization. It says right now they're trying to grow their user base and concentrate on monetization later. So that's exactly what Twitter and Facebook and even Google did when they were in startup modes. And then after they, or as it got closer to an IPO or even after an IPO, that's when they switched into, revenue mode. And you saw Facebook turn into kind of the advertising monster that it is now.
It's true. Yeah. And on the other side of this, like this is not the only competitor that has come out of the woodwork right now against Google search, right? Providing um, options for users. Like you have DuckDuckGo, which, have you tried DuckDuckGo?
A couple times, like I didn't really feel like it had that much to offer. Like if you really are against using Google, it's a viable alternative.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily feel like it is better. And most of my searches were probably returned inferior results in one way or another.
Yeah, yeah.
So
We'll have to dig into that one at some point. But the other one is I was going to mention was just Neva, because see, just like this company, U.com is saying like we're going to serve ads, we're just not going to like provide your information to the ad provider. Neva, on the flip side, is basically paid search. So you pay a subscription fee, and your search doesn't have any ads, right? And so
I
if you
mean,
just think about it, we're not going to get too much into Neva today or anything because
yeah.
we can do a whole podcast on that. But like, if you just look at it, you have DuckDuckGo as a direct competitor to Google, and then you have this company which is saying, okay, we won't give your information to third party, and then you have Neva saying, why don't you just pay monthly to have a subscription for search, and we'll just remove all the ads completely.
Hmm.
I'm guessing that all of these companies have been conducting research, and what they're finding is that consumers are looking for other options. Like we ran with the Google thing for a very long time. It's really good. Like I mean, Google's really good. I'm not going to deny that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is we've run with a single source for so long that I think they're starting to realize that maybe the feelings from users is like I'm okay. I'm open for some options now.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like I don't tend to see a lot of like primary research being done in the startup space. A lot of it is, we'll look up at what other research is out there.
Yeah, like market
Um,
research.
yeah, and the person who is leading Neva, that person comes from Google, but they're I believe they're from marketing or advertising.
I think they're
So
from the ad department. Yeah, but he was like
yeah,
a senior vice president, so he's very high up.
yeah. So coming from Google, Google's very committed to doing research and doing direct customer research. So maybe he did, maybe he didn't. What I imagine a lot of them are looking at is like, well, look at the market share that Google has,
Yeah.
and we can provide something that is an alternative to it in a meaningful way, in the way that U.com is, by providing customization options, different presentation methods, additional privacy methods, and at least running off of investor money to start. We can keep advertising off the platform that much, which personally, I don't think it's that big a deal to remove some ads. I don't think that does a great deal for my user experience,
Yeah.
but some people do feel that way.
Yep.
Um, just looking at all those things and how ultimately accessible search is as a technology, then I can see them jumping in just based on that.
Yeah, me too. Interesting. Well, I'll have to stay on top of this and watch it. Maybe there's going to be a whole new slew of search companies coming out over the next year or so, and we can kind of see how it unfolds. On to our second topic for the day, which is one that you'd sent to me. I thought was really interesting. TikTok experiments with gaming. So many people are getting into gaming now. D. I'm thinking that our company, Metric Lab, should get into gaming. What do you think?
Well, the thing with gaming is, I've said this before. I think I said this when we were talking about it with Netflix. Is you can't stick your toe into the game. You've got to jump in. You've got to be committed. You've got to, even if you're just going to be doing, match 3 games on mobile, uh, you still have to be really dedicated to it.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't seem not anymore. I think early, very, 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 very early on, maybe people were like throwing out games and consumers hadn't seen a lot of them. And so they would kind of latch on to kind of anything that's out there.
yeah,
Now I feel like consumers are totally educated on gaming, and you got to get it right.
well, I think that was basically the time that you're describing. I think is basically when mobile and kind of web platform gaming was big. Basically,
Yep.
Zynga's big heyday, right? Where
Yep.
you could just put out a game and you were reaching a new audience, and gaming was growing. It's kind of like when smartphone use was massively expanding, right? It was, you could put out something that wasn't like a flagship phone and have a lot of success with it. Uh, so in this case, like I think that TikTok is looking at it like this is a hugely profitable industry. Let's take a look. And what they're doing so far is an HTML5 based game. So it's called Disco Loco 3D.
Okay.
So one of the things about HTML5 is that it is easily readable by just about any software platform, any kind of client. So it's not native; it's easy to read. You can run it off of a web browser, and it makes it really accessible even for people who aren't using like an app-based platform. You can just potentially load it just in a web browser
Wait,
on
wait. So
like a
TikTok is
TikTok web
TikTok
browser.
themselves producing the game?
It's not entirely clear from
No,
what I've
it's
read.
if I remember right from the research you'd sent me, it's a partnership with Zynga.
Yeah, so Zynga might be developing the game. It's not entirely clear. It says it plans to launch in in partnership with Zynga. Zynga is honestly not that they're experienced with it, but most of with game development, most of Zynga's biggest successes were actually acquisitions of games that were developed by other people, like Words with Friends, right? So
Oh yeah.
they didn't develop Words with Friends; they acquired it when it was becoming successful.
Mm.
So they can develop games. I think Zynga, if you just look at their stock price over the years, and even just go by their building, which used to be huge, and they filled the whole building, and they had a big like arcade type cafeteria area, and now they're renting out a lot of that. They're making a fair amount of their money, as far as I understand, through as a landlord. Um,
Wow.
so it'll be interesting to see where this goes. It doesn't say in the articles that we've seen whether or not Zynga uh, developed the game or if they're partnering with them in some other way.
Yeah. It was an interesting approach, right? I mean, you look at like the TikTok platform and it's massive and it's growing
Mm-hmm.
so fast and everyone wants to be part of TikTok, right? Like I've heard numerous podcasts and articles about like, oh, TikTok might partner with, shopping experience companies like Shopify and, provide ads or whatever it is. Like everyone has some idea of what they should do and where they can go. And I feel like they can pretty much get anyone they want in the room to have a conversation regarding their platform. And Zynga is in the room. And it's like, why Zynga? I feel like there's so many other options that seem
Mm-hmm.
more, I don't know, viable. But who am I to say? Like, Zynga did make a huge splash early on with this type of gaming. So maybe they
Well,
know what they're
TikTok
doing.
has such a stronger brand perception and brand presence than Zynga at this point. Zynga, what I imagine they are contributing is they probably did develop this game. And it sounds like it's kind of very, very similar to some existing Zynga games from what I'm reading.
Uh-huh.
But they also have the architecture, the infrastructure in order to deliver the game. So they have the hosting, they have distribution, all that kind of stuff. And then if it's being promoted and even distributed through Zynga's platform, that but using or through TikTok's platform, but using Zynga's backend and their servers in order to run it, then that's probably what I imagine that the relationship is working out.
Uh-huh. Well, it
The other thing
says.
I'm noticing is that with the HTML5, by going HTML5 instead of like a native application,
Uh-huh.
that says they're going international. They're not focusing on places like the U.S. or Japan or
Yep.
Europe. That means that they are focused on other places in the world.
But doesn't that also mean they're focused on not just the latest and greatest phones, right? It also means that
Yes.
they want it to be able to work on old phones,
Hmm.
iPhone, whatever, threes, fours, like any Android phone that exists, right?
Well, from what I understand, it's not. I mean, iOS can definitely play in HTML5. It's very universal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it says on there the article that I read from TechCrunch. It did say that the game TikTok says the game is meant to test its audience general interest in gaming within
Hmm.
its app. The company confirmed that discussions with other game makers are already underway. So that was actually directly from the article that was written in um, it's True Blank TechCrunch. Sorry,
TechCrunch, yeah.
yeah, in TechCrunch. So it sounds to me like they're just like getting into it. But what is your overall thoughts as a gamer? I'm curious about your overall thoughts of injecting gaming into these social experiences.
I mean, this isn't new, right? Facebook tried to do this a while ago, but
Yeah.
Facebook notably just doesn't understand the gaming experience. So they tried to step into gaming a long, long time ago, and then they basically got their ass handed to them. And they are trying again because I think they want to, but they just haven't been able to provide the kind of gaming experience that gamers are looking for. And then when they did, and they kind of started taking a bigger piece of the pie from companies like Zynga, then everything left Facebook and went into mobile. And that's kind of where it stayed, where games that used to be on Zynga, or even like with Friends, for example, started being played on mobile devices with their own dedicated apps rather than being played on Facebook and giving all of that data and traffic to Facebook.
Hmm.
So this is, and I say that, that Facebook had their lunch eaten, but it was eaten by, mobile in general. So it was just a bad situation for them. And Facebook couldn't provide exclusive experiences that kept people on the platform. And that's ultimately what you need is you need games that are Facebook branded, that are Facebook exclusive, that are not going anywhere, that you can't get anywhere else, that people are going to come to your platform to play it. And that's, if TikTok really wants to be in that space, that's ultimately what they need. They need something that says, like, they need a Temple Run, they need a Candy Crush, they need a Words with Friends that says, like, the only way I can get this is by going to TikTok and getting it there.
Yeah.
And that's why you kind of need to jump in with both feet. You can't necessarily put your toes in.
Yeah.
And if they can do that, then they can become a major player in gaming. And more importantly, with their data, with their reach, they can potentially provide some new experiences and some new use cases within gaming. Beyond that, if there are, and what would be really interesting for me is if TikTok can kind of meld together the gaming experience with the TikTok experience, where you could do, I don't know, something like a TikTok scavenger hunt, where you have to find certain game relevant items within certain people's TikTok videos or something like that,
Yeah.
and then assemble that, and you can be the first to win, or who knows, something. It could be something like that. It could be something completely different. But somehow the experience of going through and watching your favorite TikTok videos also contributes to kind of like a gaming experience. That's something that comes to mind for me. So we'll see if they get there, or if they
Hmm.
continue to just kind of do like, copies of another Match 3 or Candy Crush or something like that.
Yeah, the thing that kind of popped in my mind when you were saying that was streaming. So if you think about like what, Steam and some of these others are doing, right? It's like, who's to say that down the line TikTok doesn't have a dedicated channel where people can stream their gameplay, not just the games that are on the platform and allow
Mm-hmm.
others to watch them play, but other games and stuff like that, and kind of expand it into one of these quote unquote super apps that everyone's hoping to build in the future, where you basically could keep people on your platform because they're watching videos, they're playing games, they're
Mm-hmm.
ordering food, they're doing all these things in one central location. I just see lots of opportunity here, especially if they're doing what they're doing, which is saying we're testing the audience general interest. If they don't like it, we won't do it. But if they love it, we'll get into it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not necessarily the best test, right? Because it's just I, with the demographics that TikTok has, it should be a no brainer that the TikTokers like gaming.
Uh-huh.
The question is if the unique experience that TikTok can have and provide a competitive differentiator for other stuff that's out there is what their gamers are interested in. So
Hmm.
it's more like, what can TikTok provide that's different than just downloading an app onto your phone? And then testing that is the real test of TikTok as a mobile gaming provider.
Exactly. Well, hey, let's talk about our third and final topic of the week. This is one that I find really interesting: is Twitter Blue offering a subscription. This has been talked about for what, 2 years? People,
Mm-hmm.
3 years? People are saying like, how come Twitter doesn't have a subscription? There's a lot of competing thoughts around this topic, because some say we should make it subscription, and then you should have to verify who you are as a person, no hiding behind, anonymous accounts. Like, um, if you're willing to pay, you're willing to play, kind of thing, right? And that's kind of the extreme version of subscription, right? Then on the lighter side of subscription, which is like Twitter Blue, it looks like, is the idea that you have this initial phase of like really offering more customized options for your users for things that they've been wanting to do, like being able to undo a tweet or having these really nicely organized bookmark folders, different things like that. And then you would just pay for that. And these are people who are using Twitter on a regular basis. Maybe these are writers, maybe these are producers, things like that that use Twitter to really get the message out about the content they're building. What do you think about this new subscription offering, and do you think it's going to stick?
No, not really. I mean, I mean, well, here's the thing, right? You first hear about it. I saw, oh, Twitter's putting out a subscription. I'm like, oh, that's finally they're doing this. We've been
Yeah,
talking about it forever. And at first glance, you think, oh, this is big news. Then you look at what they're offering, and you're like, this is this is lame. Like it's all right. So here's the thing, right? Here's one of them, right? An undo tweet, which is basically an edit button, which everybody has been asking for, and now they're locking it behind the paywall.
yep,
Or how about this one? Reader mode, which is a better interface for you to read things on Twitter. Well, if you are aware of a better interface for reading things on Twitter, then why is not your default interface?
true. From a UX perspective, that's what you do, right? You give
Yeah,
your customer the greatest reading experience possible, right?
yeah. Like, why are you intentionally giving your the majority of your users something that you identify as an inferior reading experience?
Yeah.
Like these are things that should be available across the board. And then the folders make sense. Folders are one thing, and then there should be some additional features in there that really sweeten this. But like the reader mode, the undo tweet editing, those are the very minimum. Those need to be like absolute baseline use Twitter things. Twitter has done very very little to advance themselves. I mean, they increased their tweet limit from 120 characters to 240 characters. They
Yeah.
launched fleets, which crashed and burned. They released a copy of Clubhouse, which sounds like it's doing
Yeah,
reasonably well.
a lot of people really like that. They said it's
Yeah,
really good thing for conferences and stuff.
which is good. That's an advancement. But here's the thing: I looked it up. Guess how much Twitter has spent on research and development since 2017?
Ooh. Oh, I couldn't even guess. I haven't been tracking it that closely.
$3 billion. They have spent $3 billion on research and development, and I can guarantee. I don't know anybody at Twitter, which is surprisingly well. I think I know a couple people, but they're not involved in research and development,
No.
which is surprising because they've been in the Bay Area. They're not in Silicon Valley; they're in San Francisco. Um, but they've been in the Bay Area for their entire time, their entire existence, and we have been in the Bay Area for their entire existence. We know very, very few people who work at Twitter, and none of them are working within research and development, as far as I know. But I can almost guarantee, because this is how it works, is that they are coming up with some really interesting ideas internally, but they're never getting to the light of day. So somewhere
Mm,
in there, there's a bottleneck that's keeping them from releasing something that would actually move the needle. And they are waiting to see other companies like Clubhouse or Snapchat or whoever else to develop something and validate it so that then they can then jump in. Uh,
yeah.
I'm, I imagine part of the research and development is also like what's the better way to serve up ads and stuff. But at the end of the day, the number one thing that I think that Twitter needs to do is solve the toxicity problem on Twitter,
Yep.
or at least moderate it in some way so it doesn't feel like you're going there in order to get angry. And the other thing is, if they're going to provide a subscription, my prediction is that the subscription mode will get subscribers. There are people who are working in a kind of a power user or corporate kind of environment that will absolutely pay what $3 or $4 in order to get this.
Yeah.
But I don't see that moving the needle on their revenue, and I don't really see that as moving the needle on subscriber base or increasing use. So it's kind of a no brainer, but it was also like implemented in like a super, super safe kind of way. And it's
Hmm.
like, come on, Twitter, you are not in the position to play it safe. You need to get out there and make some waves.
But D, tell me what you really think. so so no, I love this because you and I have been having this conversation for quite some time, and I strangely feel Twitter's an interesting one, right? I don't like the toxicity on the platform, but I do like the tool. Like meaning
Yeah.
I'll give you a great example. Like the other day, we were trying to figure out whether these tennis courts were open near our house. Well, they tweet whether or not the tennis courts are open and what the weather's like or whatever. It's just
Yes.
such an interesting, quick way of gathering information. Matter of fact, before the pandemic, when everyone was riding Caltrain, that's the train that runs on the from the South Bay to the North Bay in Silicon Valley. If you're not from here, um, that you could get updates on train closures, other issues, accidents, things like that, faster on Twitter than you
Yeah.
can directly from Caltrain because the users themselves are going, "Hey, train is down, don't come to this station," or whatever, and they're
Yep.
supporting and helping each other. So there's like a lot of good that comes out of it, but then there's so much toxicity, right? So there's a part of me that kind of goes like, put this whole thing behind a paywall. It's $9.95 a month if you want to be on Twitter. You have to be verified as who you are as a person. You can't hide behind being anonymous, and that will just dump out so many of these like weird bot accounts and people who are just out to just say horrible things about people but don't ever want to say who they are,
Yeah,
right?
I don't think it'll change anything. I don't. Well, I think it'll help to get rid of the bots, but beyond that, I don't think that a paywall is will actually will change anything for people who are just being on there, who are being trolls or who are just super toxic. Because at the end of the day, they still need to get people's engagement up in order for them to be willing to continue their subscription cost,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like what I was going to say to extend that was that like I feel that way, but I know that
Mhm.
it only solves, let's say, 40% of the problem, right?
So yeah, there's an interesting and informative thing from history because I hear a lot of people talking about like let's use subscriptions and paywalls in order to decrease toxicity.
Yeah.
So back in like the yellow journalism time period in I believe the 20s and 30s, where you had people like Pulitzer, the person who the Pulitzer Prize is named after, he was running one news organization, and you had another organization they're both in New York that was being run by William Randolph Hearst, and they were putting out extremely inflammatory, extremely sensationalized news, and it was all behind a paywall. Everything was by subscription, or you had to pay per view because it was a newspaper. And the reason why they were doing it is because they were competing with each other. So they were doing whatever they could to get a competitive edge on their competitors. So that's I feel like where Twitter is right now, where they are competing with everything else in order to get people's eyeballs, in order to get use up. And whether that is by selling advertising or by selling subscriptions, you still have to compete with other people in order to get use and to get engagement. And the easiest way to do that is with sensationalism and all these kinds of things. I think that what would make more sense, and I did an informal poll. I even asked you this. It was a while back, so you might not remember. But I said, imagine if there was a carve out of Twitter. It was a different URL you went to or a different app. Maybe it uses the same Twitter backend, but it's just news and informative posts and not any of the opinion stuff.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. I think the only way to keep that flowing, though, and actually have all these news organizations want to constantly tweet is
Hmm.
if engagement and eyeballs are still really high, right? So,
Yeah.
like, if they added a sub area, I mean, imagine
Hmm.
that. I would actually probably never go back on regular Twitter again.
I might. I mean, it
Because
depends, right?
what's on there, right? If you say news is something that comes from independent journalists as well as big organizations, plus this, that, and it's broad enough that it actually includes, like I said, like independent journalists, like people who are,
Hmm.
have Substacks and things like that, and have just interesting content on them.
Yeah.
Then that group is big enough that like that's pretty much all I ever get from Twitter is what I call informed
Yeah.
news,
Well,
really. So,
think about this, right? For me, I get two things from Twitter. One is like the very practical. I need my power just went out, and I need to find out when it's going back up.
yep.
That's those are things I'll go to Twitter. I'll look at my power company. It's not PG&E. It's the actual city that I live in. They run their own power, and they'll have updates, and it's the best way to get it. But and there's nothing inflammatory in there. Maybe somebody will like yell at them for not having for letting their power go out or something like that, and even that could be filtered out. But
Yeah.
imagine that like you can go to news.twitter.com and it'll just have that, and if people are arguing with each other, that gets filtered out. But if you want to see the full argument, you can go to traditional twitter.com and get everything.
Yeah. It's an
I
interesting
imagine
approach
that you
to,
could double dip on users where some people will go. I would probably still go to full Twitter because I follow a bunch of comedians and stuff who say or do funny things, or
yeah.
like you get some memes or things like that. But if you want to get away from that but still get the advantages of all the information that's being posted on Twitter, you have this other alternative.
I
And
like
all
it.
the information is vetted. It's coming from institutions. It's not just some dude with a blog who's saying things because he's making stuff up. It's actually like something else. And then you could do that with more stuff. You can have entertainment.twitter.com. You can have music.twitter.com. Like something like that, where it's honestly like I'm thinking of Reddit, where they have the subreddits, which has its own issues for sure. But I feel like the difference with Reddit is it's easy for the user, for me and myself,
Uh-huh.
to kind of self curate what I want to get and what I don't want to get.
That's true. And actually, you know what it reminds me of is you had got me started on that show Mythic Quest.
Oh yeah.
And by the way, it's just love it. I absolutely love Mythic Quest. And there was an episode where their whole gaming platform got overrun by Nazis. Do you remember this?
Yes.
And then they moved them all onto their own server and they didn't even
Oh
know they
yeah.
were on the server, right? It's almost kind of like that where you're like, hey,
Yeah.
we're going to move off the good stuff. And I should say the, what do you call it? Like the tame stuff or whatever it is. Like nobody like, it's just information, right?
Yeah.
And you move that off and allow people to go and enjoy that experience without being like overrun with toxicity that could or
Yeah.
may not creep in, but could creep in. And it makes me think about how they positioned that in that show, right? And I think this is an option. I'm just shocked that this has not come up as a thinking point, I should say, for Twitter. Like, I haven't read that anywhere. I haven't had anyone present that to us.
Yeah.
It makes me think that you need to send them an email
So well, it would be a tweet, right?
or a tweet.
Um,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
man. I can't believe I said that.
What Mythic Quest did was they, or within the, it's a fictional thing, but the people, whoever writes that knows their stuff. And it's one of the things I really like about that show. And then also some very smart commentary on both the tech industry and the and media and for gaming. But they quarantined the toxicity, which everybody's hoping that will happen with other platforms like Gab or whatever else is out there. Um, just like moving them off so they can yell at each other and everybody else can actually have a good time. That's like an idea, but part of that is Twitter and Facebook and these other companies need to dedicate themselves to a certain element of content moderation, which they'll say they can't do, but you actually can. You can. It's very easy to do some semantic processing to search for terms that are inflammatory. If you can use, an image recognition AI in order to search out any time that a nipple shows up on Instagram, you can
Mhm.
absolutely find when somebody is saying some extremely inflammatory stuff on Twitter or Facebook. You just have to have the will to do it, and
Yeah.
you'll probably have to also have a little bit of actual human content moderation. This looks like somebody said something terrible. Let's elevate it. Somebody can take a look at it and determine, like, hey, and you can even have the temporary hide thing, like, hey, this might be sensitive, until it
Yeah.
gets reviewed by somebody and they say, like, oh no, they're using it in context to talk about something else or whatever else. But um, that's an element of it that YouTube is also struggling right now with, where things just automatically get demonetized or taken down when they're because of some misunderstanding of the algorithm. But this is all something that they need to spend time on, because otherwise it's really, really holding back social as an industry.
Mhm.
And if once they unlock it, then they can get back to massive sustained growth, where they're not having, Senate hearings every quarter.
Yeah,
Um,
I sometimes wonder if people hear us, and because we're very objective and we're talking about like the experience and what works and what doesn't, that people think that we think that all social is bad.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
don't, and that's incorrect. I don't think it's bad. I think it needs to be cleaned up, right? It
Yeah.
needs to be fixed. Like that's what we do in the tech industry, right? Is that we figure out problems, we work on them, we try to come up with solutions. Well, guess what? This thing's a mess that needs to be fixed, and we need to do that sooner than later. Otherwise, someone is going to come in with a better product, and companies like Twitter and stuff are gonna get hurt pretty badly from that. Which,
Hmm.
hey, if that happens, great. We'll just use the better product, right? That's just the way it works in these types of industries. But what we're pointing out here from a consumer perspective of D and I working with consumers for the last 16 years is that like customers are looking for the right thing that makes them feel happy and good and useful and all those kind of things. And if you don't provide it, they'll deal with your stuff until someone does. Then
Yeah.
they'll switch over. And so they got to jump on this and start
Yeah.
working on this.
And you can see this just by looking at the Facebook demographic information. The younger
Mm-hmm.
people who are more picky about their technology experience are already fleeing the platform, and the people who are sticking around are people who got there later and are more resistant to change. People who are older demographics, people who are less technical, who got there and was like, "Oh, this is what it is." Um, and over time, it just becomes, it becomes Friendster, where it works really well with a certain demographic for an extended period of time, and then you hear 10 years later that they're shutting down because there eventually too many people left and went to somewhere else. And
Exactly.
then if this so what would happen is if this doesn't get fixed as from a fundamental kind of mechanic standpoint, it goes somewhere else. The people who go there first are probably going to be the people who are not toxic, because the toxic people are going to stay behind where all the other people are. That will be non-toxic for a while until everybody moves over from Facebook into the new platform, or from Twitter over to the new platform. That becomes toxic as it fills up, and then it
Yep.
cycles to somewhere else.
That's why it has to be designed differently.
Yes.
Yes. So, hey, this was cool. This was interesting. I love this topic. I feel like we can do an entire hour on this topic. Because it's social. I mean, we've done a couple, right? We've done a couple
Yeah.
episodes where we really dive into social, but it's starting to change again. And I think when we get enough change and enough, I don't know, adjustment to the platform, we'll jump in and do another hour on this, and we'll dig into the data and see what it says. But I wanted to point something out before we wrap up today. Next week is our 50th episode. Can you believe it, D? 50 episodes have been posted since we started this podcast in 2020.
Wow. That's amazing.
I know. And it's like the number sounds small but big at the same time, right? It's like it's 50 hours of editing. It is 50 topics of interest that we think people will like. And I'm just really happy that we continue to do it because people continue to support us. And I really want to reach out and talk to our listeners right now and say, please spread the word about our podcast. It's doing better. The numbers keep going up, and we really want it to continue to grow. So thanks again, everyone, for taking the time to listen today. We really appreciate it. We'll be posting links to many of the sources that we referenced on Twitter. Twitter, we just talked about that. So you can find us and follow us on Twitter at the X Podcast One. That's the X Podcast and the number one. If you like this podcast, found it interesting or informative, please, please, please help us out a great deal. And subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you use. Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you all next week.